In some ways, we need to be careful here that we don't take too much away from Thomas, because each and every one of us that are here today, no matter what age we are, we should never settle for second-hand understanding of who Christ is. We should demand that we have a first-hand experience, that it's something that's real to us. It's not just something that we read about, but it's something that we have experienced. And so Christ appeared to Thomas. And there, as Thomas saw him and heard him, and Scripture doesn't tell us, but it's doubtful that doubting Thomas actually needed to touch Jesus, because at that point, when he saw him and knew him, that was enough. But it does say that Jesus said to Thomas, yes, it's a good thing that you believe because you have seen me, but blessed are those, that's us, who have not seen and still believe. So this morning I want to suggest to you that we need to believe so that we can see, instead of seeing to believe. Even though that's something that we have heard pretty much all of our life, that seeing is believing, isn't it true that in our world especially that it has to be more than just seeing? I mean, we live in a time with technology when we have virtual reality and all these special effects in the movies. I mean, do you believe everything that you see? And yet, Jesus calls us to begin to believe, and as we begin to believe, we will begin to see. I know you've probably heard that old story about two shoe salesmen who were sent to a remote country to sell shoes. And when they arrived there, they were there just about a week, and they sent back a report to their corporate office, and one salesman sent back and said, "No one here wears shoes. I'm coming home." And then they had a report from the other shoe salesman that said, "No one here wears shoes. Send 5,000 more pairs. I'm excited." Dear friends, how are we, when we look at our world, do we see the things that are missing and realize that there is a need that we can respond to? Or do we see things that are missing and say, I'm just going to go home. I'm going to go back into that room and lock the doors. I'm going to go back into the tomb. Or do we let the reality of Christ in our midst change what we see? We many times talk about that glass of water, you know, that is filled to the halfway mark. And we say that the optimist says that it's half full, and the pessimist says that it's half empty. But what do we as Christians say? Perhaps Jesus is leading us to say, when we see that glass, to ask the question, who around me needs a drink? You see, there's so much about our life that we will see differently if we allow our very spirits to believe. And as we believe, we will begin to see. There's an account of a Greek writer whose name I can't pronounce, Nikos Karzakakazakis. See there, I told you I couldn't do it. Don't you love that? And he writes a story, though, about a monk who had long planned to go to Jerusalem, just wanted to go to Jerusalem to see a holy place where Christ had been born. And he finally began with the money he had saved for 40 years. And soon after he left the monastery, he passed a field. He was on his way for this trip to see where Christ was born. And as he was going, he went past a man who was digging and trying to get into the roots to get some food for his family. And he said, "Good morning, Father. Where are you going?" And the monk replied, "I'm going to Jerusalem to see where Christ was born and where Christ was buried, and I'm going to march around it 3 times and pray." And the man in the field said, "That trip will cost much money." "Yes," said the monk, "all my life savings." And then the man suggested, "Father, why not march around me 3 times and give me the money so that my wife and children might have food?" And the monk did. The monk never saw where Christ was buried, but he saw where Christ was alive and living in other people. Dear friends, do we know what it's like to believe so that we see differently? The wife put up, while the husband was at work, a poster in the kitchen that says, "Prayer changes everything." He came home and didn't say anything, but when the wife went in later, she realized that it was gone. It wasn't there. there. So she asked her husband about it. She said, "Why did you take that down? Don't you believe in prayer?" He said, "Oh yes, I believe in prayer, but I don't want to change." You see, dear friends, when Christ comes to us and all that He is, and He says to us that it's time to get out of our tombs, get out of our past, to start loving the unlovable, to start forgiving those who are unforgivable, to start being His love and His light and His salt, it means that we'll have to change. It means that instead of looking at the world and saying the world has to change, that Christ says to us, but for the world to change, you have to change so that the world can see me. Jesus comes not only for those moments of sugar and joy. This morning, wow, I love it when we baptize little babies. Little 5-month-old Savannah at 9 o'clock this morning was here, and she was just, cooling and smiling, just a picture of life. I love those moments in church, don't you? When we baptize children and have confirmands and receive new members and have weddings, those are wonderful sugar moments. But Christ says, yes, I'm here for those moments, but I'm also calling you to be the salt. When you get salt in the wound, it's not exactly pleasant, but it has a way of healing. And many of us are called to go into the places that are hurting and where there needs to be healing, and going into the places where people don't want to see or believe in Jesus. But unless we go, they will never have that opportunity. Jesus was there to call His disciples to come out and get out and to be Christ, so that others could believe and see. So, dear friends, what will we do this week? Are we ready? Are we ready to change? Are we ready to claim again what we claimed last Sunday? Are we ready to begin to believe so that we can see? May it be our prayer today and tomorrow and every day until we see Christ face to face. May we be all that He calls us to be. Praise be to Him who calls us to believe and to see.